in the Omaha Council Bluffs Metro.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with just what kinds of things do we see or expect to see during heat waves like this? Dr. Shove, if you want to start, and then Sarah, when he's done, you want to give us what you see.
Thanks. So yes, in this heat, we see all sorts of things in our clinics and emergency rooms, heat related. And as you think about heat injuries and how heat affects the body, it's really on a continuum scale. So it starts with just general dehydration that we think about. If I'm hot and I'm not drinking enough fluids and I feel dehydrated. So maybe I'm thirsty and feeling a little lightheaded, those sorts of things. People can also get a heat rash. They can get heat edema, so swelling of their extremities related to the heat, obviously sunburns as well. But then as we start getting into concerning medical conditions, then we get into the range that we talk about being heat exhaustion. This is when it goes from being just kind of hot and dehydrated to where we're having dizziness, headache, weakness, fatigue, muscle cramps, maybe unsteady gait. Typically at this point, we're sweating pretty heavily, and our skin is cold and pale as we're trying to dissipate that heat. And then the worsening situation that this can develop into if we don't intervene is then heat stroke, which can be life-threatening. So that usually involves in some sort of a change in mental status, that we become confused or delirious or combative. And the worrisome sign is we stop sweating, which some people think is a good thing. Hey, I'm not sweating anymore. I'm getting used to it. No, that's bad. Your body's given up. And typically at this point, your skin is hot and red. And this can lead to seizures, loss of consciousness, and even death. And so again, into our clinics, we see people with anywhere in that spectrum, depending on how soon they recognize that they're in trouble, ranging from being kind of lightheaded, their heart racing, feeling kind of faint, to actually then having more of this fatigue, the muscle cramps, abdominal cramps, and then unfortunately even ranging into, again, the mental status changes and things like that.
Thank you, Dr. Shove. And actually, just while we're on the topic, how do you know when you do need to go to priority care, urgent care, or an ER? What would those differentiating factors be while we're on the topic?
So the key thing, once you recognize something's going on, is you need to do something about it. So if you're feeling mildly dehydrated, get some fluids in you. And ideally some water, but also along the way, something that has some electrolytes in it as well, the sports drinks and things like that, ideally non-caffeinated, ideally without much sugar in them or no sugar at all. But when you've done those things, when you've gone inside and you're still feeling lousy after you've been 15, 20 minutes in the air conditioning, or if you're not able to get into an air conditioned environment and you're feeling poorly, that's the time to seek help through some sort of a walk-in urgent care, priority care type thing. Again, when you've got those severe symptoms, severe cramps, confusion, lethargy, those sort of things, that's when you need to go to the emergency room. That's where we think about rapid cooling, IV hydration, things like that.
Thank you. So, Sarah, you obviously deal with children. Can you walk us through what kinds of things you see or expect to see at pediatric place during heat waves like this?
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll see kind of some more of the the vague symptoms. Parents will bring their kids in. They've just been more sleepy, the nausea, vomiting. They just kind of had this headache, and sometimes they just don't put all the symptoms together. But we'll see a lot of kind of the sooner, more vague symptoms, and are able to either what we call PO challenge and get them some oral fluids here, try and rehydrate them, see if that kind of helps any of their symptoms, or we can do IV fluids as well to rehydrate them. A lot of times we see kids when, they're still just very much at that dehydration point. But with some of the athletes, they'll come in with the muscle cramps or, some of that just kind of confusion. They've been out in the heat for too long and they were just kind of not making sense or just kind of confused, and we'll see some of that as well.
So for those younger ones who can't really communicate with their parents about what they're feeling, they can't say I'm thirsty or I'm confused. What are some symptoms for like children that are nonverbal yet, a little bit younger?
The cool pale skin, if they've been sweating and like he said, they stop sweating, or if they're starting to get really red and hot, their temperature's up, They don't really want to wake up. Like when we're getting into the lethargy, they're just sleepy and, it's hard to wake up. Those kinds of things would be concerning for little ones that can't speak or tell you yet.
And then we know that heat affects children, adults, and elderly different. Why does this type of heat affect young ones in this way?
I think they just, like you said, sometimes they can't really verbalize their needs. Sometimes they just have a lower threshold for their bodies being able to control it. So with that lower threshold and then not being able to necessarily communicate what they need all the time, it can hit them a bit harder or what seems like a lot quicker too.
Thanks, Sarah. Dr. Schoaf, elderly. So we've talked about children and adults. Heat also affects elderly in a different way. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, definitely. One thing to add with the kiddos, of course, is if you think about babies, is they really don't sweat as well as you and I do. And obviously sweat is evaporation of our sweat is our major way of cooling us down. So as we talk about the elderly also, it's conditions that decrease our sweat capacity that makes it worse for us, as well as some underlying conditions. So again, the more elderly patients also have some decreased sweat capacity, so they don't dissipate the heat as well as a younger adult would. Various chronic conditions make you more prone to having adverse effects of the heat. If you have asthma or COPD, as you get more hot, it becomes harder to breathe, especially in the hot, humid air that we have around here. If you have high blood pressure or other heart disease, you're putting a lot of strain on your heart and your cardiovascular system as the heat comes up and your heart rate goes up to try to again to lose that heat, especially then if you become dehydrated, it puts quite a strain on your heart. Patients with diabetes, there are some diabetes medications that interfere with temperature control. Kidney disease also, if you have chronic kidney disease, again, risk worsening that if you're not taking care of yourself. And there are various medications that also worsen or put us at higher risk for heat injury at lower degrees. So allergy medicines, our antihistamines affect our heat control. Blood pressure medicines, especially beta blockers and diuretics, mental health medications, antidepressants, antipsychotics, benzodiazepines, stimulants, even caffeine affect our ability to again, process the heat. Anticholinergics, so people may be taking medications for bladder control or bowel or for their Parkinson's disease. And then there are antibiotics and acne medicines that increase the skin sensitivity to the sun to be careful about as well.
So that goes into how hot is too hot for people to be outside. What obviously now we are in a heat warning, it's very obvious everyone should be on alert. But what is that threshold to start to be concerned about? Dr. Schoaf and then Sarah, if you want to jump in too.
I'd say there's really not one specific temperature because it really varies upon the person and what they're doing. People that have been acclimatized to the heat. So if you've started working out in the heat a lot and you've worked your way up, you can tolerate greater heats than somebody that stays indoors most of the time and then needs to go mow their lawn or something like that. And it's not just, again, the absolute temperature, the humidity is also a significant factor into it. When the air is more humid, the sweat that we create doesn't evaporate as well. And so we don't lose that heat. Also, with the moisture in the air, it holds in pollutants particles more also. So that makes the air more dangerous to us. So looking at that feels like temperature is much more important. There's fancy medical scientific things about wet bulb globe temperature and things like that when I was in the military, we used a lot to look at and rate the scale. So really anything over 80 degrees can be quite concerning. As we get hotter and hotter and more humid, it really becomes a severe condition.
Thank you. Sarah?
Well, as you said, there's not one particular temperature, but just making sure that, if your kiddos are playing outside, constantly checking, making sure no one's overheating, offering lots of drinks, maybe during the hottest part of the days, finding some indoor activities and letting them play earlier in the morning, excuse me, or later in the evening when it's not so hot or the sun isn't, kind of beating down on them. So.
Along those same lines, kids we know are back in school. Some might be walking to school or waiting outside for a bus or be involved in outdoor activities. do you have any advice for parents, maybe clothing options, water? Should they be playing sports outside right now?
Yeah, so excuse me again. Always light, loose fitting clothing when it's this hot outside. If they have to walk or wait, trying to, stay in the shade as much as they can on their walk or at their bus stop. Always sending them with something to drink on the way, making sure they stay hydrated for that walk. Sports, I believe here in Lincoln, they've been pretty proactive and have canceled afternoon activities for today and tomorrow, and we'll reschedule. But this would be a good time to, get in the weight room or, do something indoors, again, in loose, light fitting clothing, inside, and, stay out of the heat until it cools down a little bit.
Thank you. Um, a big news story, we know we've kind of all heard about it, but we know that leaving children and pets inside of cars during heat waves like this can be deadly. Sarah, can you walk us through what happens in a hot car?
Yeah, so basically you get out of your car, and even with the windows cracked, with how hot it is outside, even in you park your car in the shade, there is a little bit of difference, but that car being outside in the sun in this heat, they said even I think 10 minutes after the car's been off, it can raise, 20 degrees. So, we're starting at 80 in 10 minutes, your car can be 100. And right now we're starting well above 80. So, those cars heat up very quickly. And then, especially little ones, I know there was a comment made like, most of them have, these accidents are related to kids under 2 years old. Well, they're strapped in a car seat and there's no way for them to, even try and get out. So they're stuck kind of in this hot box, and it becomes very dangerous very quickly because those temperatures rise so fast.
We got a question. If a child has been left in a car that is hot, what are the first steps that people can do? What should be done?
I'd definitely call 911. If it looks like they are not responding, see about getting in that car, breaking a window, getting them out, getting them cooled down. So, but definitely um, alerting the authorities, getting an ambulance there, those kinds of things as well.
And same applies for pets. I will just add that in there.
Yes.
Dr. Shove, do you have anything to add about vehicles, things of that nature?
Yeah, just to add to some certain points from Sarah, that, again, cracking the windows, putting in the shade, doesn't really lower the temperature that much. So we think that, oh yeah, I've cracked the windows, I'm parked in the shade. It really doesn't help. Our cars become ovens very, very quickly. And so it doesn't take long, again, especially for a child to quickly overheat. Even on a cloudy day, it can happen as well. And the other key thing is, again, the preventive pieces that we think about. So if you're traveling with a kid in the back, when you put the kid in the back of the car, put something else back there that you're going to need when you get to your destination. Put your cell phone in the back seat. It will also keep you from texting while you drive. Put your cell phone back there. Put your purse back there. Put your briefcase back there. Your ID badge, your car keys, something you're going to need at your destination. Put it in the back seat. So when you get out of your car, you have to get there back there to get that, and you're reminded that your child is there. If you can't do that, put in some sort of a reminder on your door, on the passenger seat in front with you, something to remind you. I know a lot of our cars these days even give us reminders to check the back seat. Make that a habit. Anybody that has children or is around children, make it a habit every time you get out of your car, just to glance at the back seat and make sure there's nothing in there that you're forgetting about. Another key thing is sometimes kids get into cars accidentally and then lock themselves in. So make sure you teach your kids a car is not a place to play in. Make sure you keep your keys out of reach of young children so they don't accidentally get in there and lock themselves in their cars.
Great advice. Aside from heat stroke, heat rashes, that is something, and Sarah and Sarah might be for you for children with heat rashes. I don't know if that's more common with children, but how to know when a heat rash is a heat rash, when it's something more serious, and how to treat it.
Yeah, so for heat rashes, a lot of times they'll start in the folds. So kind of like where your arm creases up by your elbow or kind of down by the groin. They can spread pretty generalized, but the first thing is getting inside, getting cooled down, getting some water, and seeing if the rash just kind of takes care of itself. If not, they said like baby powder, things just so it's not rubbing on itself can be helpful for the heat rash as well. But a lot of times it's just supportive care is getting cooled down and getting rehydrated.
Perfect. Dr. Shove, do you have anything to add about other types of heat related things? We've always talked about sunscreen with sunburns. I doubt anyone's trying to stay outside long enough to get a sunburn today, but any other things you want to add?
I hope not. So I think the general advice would be if you're out in the heat and you start to feel something, a rash, again, tired, dehydrated, hot, whatever, confused, first and foremost, get out of the hot environment, get some fluids in you. Now, the proviso with that, if you're seeing somebody that's now reaching that heat stroke stage where they're confused or combative, that person you really don't want to try to force to drink something because there's a risk that they may aspirate it or spit it up or something like that. So again, that's where 911 is important. But if you're having these things, if you wonder, is my headache, is my stomach ache because I'm in the heat? The key is get out of the heat, get some fluids in you gently, and see what happens. If the rash goes away, if you start to feel better, then yes, it probably was the heat. And then again, stay out of the heat for a while, fully recover. You're at risk to re-injure yourself if you've had an injury in the short term. And if it persists after you've cooled down, then it's probably wise to be seen.
Thank you. Good advice. Sarah, I'll let you kind of do your final thoughts. And if anyone has any last minute questions, I also just shared the CDC's link to their charts about heat and kind of what a car's heat looks like only at 80 degrees. Like Sarah mentioned, obviously we're a lot higher than that. So that chart, just picture it a lot more expedited. But Sarah, if you have any final thoughts today that you want to share.
Yeah, just everybody stay cool out there. But if you need us, we definitely are here for your kiddos 18 and under at pediatric place or the regular ER. We're kind of all in one, but definitely stay cool, stay hydrated, keep drinking, even if you're not thirsty. And if you need us, we're here.
Thank you. And reporters, I am trying to gather as much data as I can to get numbers for the amount of people we've seen and treated for heat-related illness and injury. All I can say right now is it is dozens, plural, between Lincoln and Omaha. That is just heat-related, dehydration, exhaustion, things of that nature. Dozens, plural. Hopefully I'll get a final tally by the end of this week. So stay tuned. Thank you all for joining, and if you need the recording, just